Hello, lab experts, and welcome to the Diagnostics podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be sitting down with James Payne, and we're going to be talking about a program that he has put in place that has been helping students, or not even students, people in high school, develop the skills that are necessary to work in the laboratory, and that has helped them get jobs in the world of biology. So let's get straight into it. How are you today, James?
Doing very well, Robertson. Really excited to speak with you and your audience today about my fairly unique look at medical laboratory education and trying to inspire high school students into joining the medical laboratory as a potential career and walking in with a ton of laboratory skills, so they're not only ready to work, as you said, immediately after high school, but also well prepared for college.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that and then immediately I thought it was a wonderful idea and something that hopefully more and more people are going to try applying in different countries around the world, because I think in many places we have the same issues that there are in the United States. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is James Payne?
So I am a high school career and technical educator. So my students gain not only theoretical knowledge, but they also get skills. And so I've been doing that for going into 12 years now. When I started the program, I didn't have a beaker or test tube, didn't have a curriculum, no state standards. I just was told go, and because I started 2 weeks before school started. Most of my equipment that I tried to order suddenly was back ordered, so I had to do a lot of teaching with things like Kool-Aid or colored water or oil or things where okay, I got one piece of equipment, how can I find a way to use that? So like one of my labs that I've still used today was one where I make up really concentrated Kool-Aid to the point where you can't see through it. There's so much sugar in there. And then the students take micropetters and suck up 2 mils of the Kool-Aid and then do a serial dilution down to 1:8 dilution. And then they take those microcentrifuge tubes and put them in a microcentrifuge, spin them down. And so then you'll see the difference in the color, obviously, because the difference in the color of the Kool-Aid, but also you'll get sugar pellets and decreasing in size, so they can see how the pellet changes with the concentration. And then they'll actually have to suck the supernatant off and get down to just that pellet and then reconstitute the pellet, just like you would do if you were doing DNA extraction and concentration, purification steps. So it gives them a good chance to learn how to use all these different pieces of equipment and make it so that they start to gain confidence. And if they mess up, it's Kool-Aid. Just go make it again, keep going. But that program has grown significantly, especially since COVID. We kind of hit the ground running really well through COVID, so that not only are my students learning about 60 different laboratory skills, primarily in medical laboratories, but also biotech skills, chemical skills. They're learning things that could be used in the food industry, the things that are used in environmental research, all those sort of things, even a little bit of forensics. So they learn all those skills. But one of the things that we are able to add starting in 2020 is my students are actually going out into the local medical laboratories. And in their junior year, they'll spend 40 hours at one of our local medical labs drawing blood on real patients for real samples. And then in their senior year, they will spend 80 hours in one of our local medical labs learning how to be medical lab assistants and specimen processors. That includes 2 of our hospital labs. And we're also bringing online now the American Red Cross, because we have one of our centers that takes all of the blood from the surrounding region and does the processing, turning the blood products, and then shipping it back out. So my students will be able to work in that environment. We have people from all around the world speak to our students about medical lab careers and how they got into them, kind of from high school to where you are now. I had these couple in May, I think. We had the CEO of ASCP spend an hour speaking to our students about his career and how he got where he is, which is always really powerful, seeing okay, if I ever wanted to be the CEO of ASCP, I know now the path on how to get there. It may not be the path I take, but at least I have one path idea.
Yeah.
And that's really inspiring to the students, the fact that they can get those skills, test them out in the real world. Some cases are paid co-ops. We've even got some really cool shadows that we've been able to set up for students. Like one of my students got an opportunity to shadow a pathologist assistant for the day. So she spent 3 hours in the gross room getting samples coming down from surgery and getting a chance to hold the organs that are there and watch the dissections occur. She spent 30 minutes with one of the top pathologists in New York State. Getting a chance to work on one of those teaching scopes and seeing actual samples that the pathologist is explaining what she's seeing. And then she got to spend 2.5 hours in what's called a gross conference, which is where the medical examiner, the pathologist assistant, the resident are all talking about autopsies that they did. And these are what they saw in the autopsy. And she got to sit in on that. And just before she left, she got to see a real human brain, which she was very excited about. And the nice part is now she knows that pathologist assistant, what she wants to do, versus it being a theoretical, this sounds cool. She knows that she can actually handle doing that sort of career. So we get a lot of capability for it. So our what we call the medical laboratory assisting and phlebotomy program is a program where high school students get a chance to explore medical lab careers, gain some skills, and can get employed.
All right. And how do you get the students? Do they choose to come? How does it happen? Is it the school that targets some students?
Yeah. So in New York State, we have this system, which is different than most other states, where we have a lot of little districts. And so it'll be a town or even sometimes a section of a town that forms a school district. And typically they don't have the funds to have a career and technical education center that would actually be able to afford all the pieces of equipment that you would need to run a program. Same thing, like you're thinking like an auto tech class, you need lifts and you need all these tools and everything. And it just wouldn't be something they could do in their budget. But what they do is they form boards of cooperative educational services so they can bring together resources so that students can do these career and tech programs. They can do special education. They can do data analysis or have computer IT services, that sort of thing. All provided by the BOCES. And so students essentially have, if they want to go to a program like ours, about half of their state tuition comes to my school to help fund our programs.
All right, I see. So I was about to ask, how is this different from maybe some of the general biology classes that they would have? So from what your response, I'm getting that it's more involved. There's more equipment. They can dive deeper than what they'll do in their normal biology classes.
Yeah. So at least in the US, I don't know about all around the world, but at least in the US, generally science classes, even though they could be really engaging and cool, their labs are kind of more of a fun worksheet or interesting worksheet. It's not trying to build a skill set for the students, where I'm trying to make sure that they're truly skilled. So as an example, we do titration to teach some, basic chemistry skills and precision and that sort of thing. And so they have to get 3 results that are within 0.1 milliliters of each other. And if they don't get that, they have to go back and do it again. And most students, it usually takes somewhere between 5 and 9 tries, because just the slightest movement, it can be a quarter of a drop. It's suddenly your whole results messed up and you got to do it all over again because that dark purple or dark pink. I don't know if you've ever done titration, but the frustration of it going dark pink from totally clear is always difficult. But I had some students that they've done it 17 or 18 times because they just had to slow down. They were so used to getting a result. It doesn't matter what the result is. I'll put it in there, or I messed up, I'm going to go copy off my friend and just I get through it, versus trying to build those skill sets. And, with the repetition I'm allowed to do, like I said, I'm teaching them how to use a micropetter with Kool-Aid, but then we're going to be using a micropetter for doing some slide making. They'll do it for microbiology. They'll do it where they're doing genetic testing, whether it's restriction digestion and cloning, whether it's PCR, whether it's bacterial transformation. Those sort of skills, they can build on it, and it's all inside of one program. And the nice part for them versus like my wife who teaches biology. She never worked in a lab, so she doesn't have this is why you would do something, because I've made those mistakes before. I've seen people make those mistakes. And
Mhm.
so that your average biology teacher, at least in the US, hasn't done enough of the kind of lab work to know this is why you do it. They would see a video that might say that, but I can add personal stories of times I've made a mistake or
Yeah.
times when I've seen something done wrong.
And the skills that they're learning, how transferable are they? How have they been able to help them, like in the field?
Highly transferable. Obviously, the main focus is your typical medical laboratory, but they could be working in a microbiology research lab or a genetics research lab. I've had students that Eastman Kodak still makes film in Rochester, New York, and they have a film chemistry lab. And one of my students was part of a group of 3 that did a paid co-op with Eastman Kodak for, I think, 8 weeks. And he loved it, did really, really well, and was immediately hired afterwards. And he's still there today. But in 2 years of the first 2 years of him being there, he learned all the jobs in the laboratory. And then he decided he wanted to go into the quality control for the film, where they've got their film when they make it is about 6 feet wide rolls that are hundreds of feet long. And so they'll take strips of those 6 foot wide rolls and do analysis to make sure that everything's good in terms of the quality of the film. And normally that would take 10 years before they would even consider you for that position. And
Yeah.
he's done it in 2 because he's so much farther advanced than their typical employee. I have some students that have gone on to get into genetic counseling. I've had some students that have decided, because we do a little bioinformatics training, that they like that. So they're actually going to one of the top universities in the country for technology, Rochester Institute of Technology. And she's going for bioinformatics. She liked the combination of the coding and the biology aspect of it. And
Yeah.
so transferable there, certainly, like I said, the food industry. So when you're trying to do both quality control, but also trying to develop new food products that people may be interested in, the doing environmental testing, like I said, forensics, even the veterinary medical laboratory would be a potential possibility. Or I've had some students that decide that they want to go more into like nursing, but having the stronger background in both infections and the medical laboratory, the fact they're getting in genetics and microbiology, those are all things that you're going to be covering as part of like a bachelor's of nursing
Yeah.
program, not necessarily an associate's, but definitely a bachelor's. And so they're better prepared for those programs.
Yeah, so actually it's pretty good. So you're able to get students from high school directly into pretty well-paying jobs, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something that because they're getting those the phlebotomy skills, they can be working directly out of the program in that. Also as lab assistants, specimen processors, which pay decent. And definitely it's something that it gives them a chance to see if this is something they want to continue to do. And if they
Yeah.
want to go to college, they're much better prepared. They know what colleges are out there. In a lot of cases, I can help them get into college. So basically any medical lab college in the entire, all of New York State, I have agreements with those colleges to help them get in.
Mm.
And we have dual credits with some of the colleges where they can knock out some of the credits while they're in my program, or they can in some cases even get scholarships, $1,000
Yeah.
in scholarships just because they're in our program.
I think that also allows them to be a lot more sure or certain about what they want to do in college, because there are situations that I've seen kind of everywhere where students get into college and sometimes they don't even necessarily want to get into medical laboratory science. Maybe they wanted to get into some other field and they decided to try medical laboratory science. They don't really like it, or sometimes they see the name, maybe medicine is something they had thought of in the past, but they don't really want to go through that route. And so they see medical laboratory science, they try it 1 year, 2 years, eventually they drop out. So actually that's interesting, because teaching them some of the skills and then having them already doing the work in the labs, they can see what it's about, what the job is about, and then from there know whether it's something they really want to pursue or if it's not really for them.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had some students that this was perfect. They knew this is what they wanted to do. One of my students is going to kind of do the step up the ladder, not do a big jump. She do step by step. So she got her phlebotomy certification and her medical lab assistant certification. She's going to use that to work while she's getting her associates as a laboratory technician for the 2-year degree, and then go on to the 4-year medical lab scientist degree, and then go on for that pathologist assistant. But she knows her exact path of what she wants to do. She's even nailed it down to the colleges she thinks she wants to go to for each one of those steps. So that's
Yeah.
hugely helpful in students knowing that and having a chance to experience it. It's why some of the colleges are willing to offer, thousands of dollars in scholarships, because they're more likely to stay than your average student who doesn't know anything about it. I think more
Yeah.
students would probably be interested in medical lab science if they knew it existed. Unfortunately, it's the hidden profession. So if I'm interested in helping people, I like the idea of medicine, I'll either be a doctor or a nurse, and that's it. And they don't realize there's a
Yeah.
whole science behind it that's absolutely in need. The stat in the US right now is that we need 26,000 new graduates a year to just maintain, and we only graduate 5,000. Yeah,
Wow.
it's bad. You're talking about states where they have a 25% or more vacancy rate. I think it's 16 states have 25% or more vacancy rate. I think 45% of the field is 55 or older, so there's a retirement wave coming. It's in a tough situation right now for something that no one knows really exists, and it's
Yeah.
something that is absolutely necessary for medicine to work. There's that stat out there. I don't know how truly accurate it is, but 70% of all medical decisions are based on laboratory results. Somewhere around that number is what we need for medicine to work. And in some cases, you're looking at hospitals losing their trauma center designation because they don't have enough laboratory capacity to do all of those tests. They need 24 hours worth of capacity.
I think one nice thing also about the program is when you get the students earlier, then of course they have more energy. If they really like what they're doing, they put a lot more energy into it. That brains are a lot more plastic. And so you're teaching them exactly what it is they are going to be needed on the job. So usually it's a lot faster. I think that's also one of the reasons why the student that you had at Kodak was able to do it a lot faster, because he probably had a lot more time to put in and a lot more energy to put in, and then the interest was there to add to that. And on top of that, if he was being paid, then that was like an extra incentive on top of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something where I teach them at a college level, community college level, that the content is taught there with the purpose of them making it so that if they do go to college, that they are ahead of the game. That's not just I know the skills, because certainly when it comes to the laboratory parts of their classes, they knock it out of the park. But I also want to make sure that the theory portions of their classes, that they're at least a significant percentage into it, maybe 25, maybe 50. In some cases, it's been like 75% of their class they already know going in. I've even had a student who for one of her first college lab classes, the professor said, "Don't come back till like November. I don't need you. You already are so far advanced. Just come back in November and we'll start." That's where your knowledge starts to taper off.
And in her case, what did she do? Did she have like work that she was already doing outside of the university? Because I guess that becomes interesting if, let's say, you already know a big portion of what's being done in the laboratory, and so you have slightly more time, maybe while others need that extra time to be cramming and then learning what needs to be done for each and every examination. Probably some of your time could be spent also working a little bit on the side to help pay for your school.
Yep, some students do that, and some students want to focus solely on school. So it kind of depends on the student. But like my one that's going to be doing the technician through pathologist is planning on working, and the college understands how far advanced she is, so that she will, if they can set up the work study, which you need to be like approved for it in terms of based on your income, that sort of thing. But if she can, they want her to basically set up all of their labs, even stuff that would be at the end of her sophomore year, that she would be setting up the labs, helping teach the labs, those sort of things as part of her work study. If that doesn't work out, the hospital in that area has already said she automatically has a job. They will do it per diem to work completely around her schedule so that it's not going to affect her grades. She can work when she wants, and she can even pick the type of position, whether it's a lab assistant, whether it's a phlebotomist, whether it's something else at that entry level that they're legally allowed to have her do. They absolutely, want her there.
So earlier on, you said that COVID helped in the sense that there was more interest in the program. Before then, was it a bit hard to gain traction? What were some of the issues that there were?
Yeah, it's combination of being the hidden profession. The naming wasn't as good. So when we first started the program, my bosses thought laboratory technology was the route to go for the name. And I ran into a lot of students that didn't really understand what that meant. And some of them thought it was like a computer class, even though it started with the word laboratory. It was something that I was still learning what we were going to do. We didn't have all the equipment that we do today. It struggled with misconceptions, and in general, the type of education I'm doing, career and technical education, is often thought for students that are only hands-on learners, and that even though everyone really is a hands-on learner,
Yeah.
but it's the students that, oh, you're not college material, you go to a MOCO, where I don't think that necessarily needs to be true. I think that if a student wants to explore a career, this is a lot more effective way than going on websites or even getting a chance to shadow it with a person, building that, do I have the skills to actually do this? That's one of the problems I think you run into, like you were saying, with students that you have go to university and then they figure out they don't want to do it. I'm willing to bet in a lot of cases it is probably where you start getting to the laboratory portion. They're like, I'm not good at this. This is not what I'm good at. And so if you give them a chance to test that out while in high school for free for them, that's a great way for them to see if it's something they can do, versus finding out at the end of the school, oh yeah, I'm not good at this. Now what do I do? Even though there's a ton of another potential other career paths that having a degree in medical lab science could lead to, it's still not the same, and that's why they may change majors or drop out.
I think also in universities, well, I don't know exactly how it works for medical laboratory science in the United States, but for example, here in Benin Republic, and actually I think lots of different African countries also, when you're in the university and let's say you're studying to become a medical laboratory scientist, you don't necessarily have access to the laboratory for long periods of time. When I think medical laboratory science is a field where you need to be constantly doing in order to be able to build not just the skill, but actually to be used to doing the same thing over and over and doing it well. Because you can't just have a set time to go to the laboratory maybe once or twice a semester for a period of time to do your practicals. And then immediately after you're done, switch into the laboratory and be able to perform at full capacity. Of course, that's not going to happen. And sometimes students have issues with that switch. And sometimes they're scared of getting into like the practical aspects. And so we have some students that, as an example, will search for jobs for a little while, but eventually although they had a degree in medical laboratory science, eventually just switch and get into something else entirely different.
Yeah, no, I mean, my students, I have them 2.5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 years. So they get a really long time with me to not only learn the theory, but they spend approximately half that time overall in the lab, and getting a chance to build up that muscle memory, make it so that it's not something like when I learned micropipetting in college, I learned it as, like you said, where I've done a lab, I did it, I thought I knew what I was doing, but then when I started working in a research lab, after my first week, my boss came by as I was working, said, "Stop, do that again. Yeah, you're doing it wrong." I was going to the second stop on the micropipetter instead of the first. And that was a revolutionary thing in terms of how the experiments were going. And it's something that my students in their third week of ever being in a lab are better than I was after coming out of a university program. Just because I can break it down for them, really have them focused, be able to try it a bunch of times, like I said earlier, and have it so that I can explain why you do it this way. It seems like when you're first learning it, first stop, second stop, my finger barely
Yeah.
moved a difference. How can that possibly make an effect? And it does. And
Yeah.
so it's something that I can tell them of the times when I made mistakes of stuff like that, or, talking about being precise and doing things the same way every time. I can talk about when I was in research, we were doing Western blots on with human blood samples, and everything was going good. It seemed to be working, and all of a sudden it stopped working, and I wasn't getting any result on the film at all. And I went back and tried it again, still didn't get anything, and then eventually reported to my boss and said, I can't figure out what happened. Everything was working great. I don't know what happened. So he systematically went through the protocol, and it took, I think, probably close to 6 months to figure out what was going on. And basically what was happening is, between the primary and secondary antibody, I wasn't washing it well enough. It was one of those, it was my first job, and didn't realize how precise I needed to be. And I think I was doing it for 30 seconds or so instead of a minute. And that made all the difference in the world. And thankfully my boss was patient enough with me to let me figure that portion out. But that's something I tell the students very early on: being precise, doing things exactly how they're written. And if you don't understand how it's written, ask before you just assume. And that's something that I don't know that was beaten into me when I was in college, but I definitely make sure the students get it as soon as I'm able to teach it.
And you said it's 2.5 hours a day for 5 days. How was their curriculum set up to allow that chunk of time to be allotted to this?
So by going to one of our programs at BOCES, they actually have the students, because they're coming from 9 different districts, 12 different high schools. So some of them are on a 30 or 45-minute bus ride in and 35 bus ride back. So I have a morning class that's 2.5 hours, and I have an afternoon class that's 2.5 hours. And the students, is part of their, junior and senior year in high school, they have to have certain classes where they were already all set. So they couldn't be so far behind in terms of their studies, so that they have a ton of makeup classes they have to do. You also get into that some of the courses they can take through us. So, like, for example, students in my program can earn science credits. They can also earn health class credit. They can also earn a English credit. So it allows for them to not have to take as many courses at their home school would have normally taken, because they're able to knock it out with us.
Yeah. Okay, I see. And so essentially you're able to have them in a situation. So it's a situation where some things that they would have had to do because they're coming here, they don't have to do it over there anymore. And so it helps balance things out.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, so for example, our English class is a hybrid where most of the assignments are based on assignments they're doing in my class that require the skill sets that would have been taught at English 12, and then there's some additional assignments that they'll do that will cover the rest of the requirements. And so we have an English teacher on staff that would cover that portion, and so they leave me for usually about an hour once a week to meet with that teacher to keep up with that work. And some students are able to do it where they are completely remote from that teacher, and they just hand in the assignments as they go and don't have to meet with her. Other ones, they physically meet with her, and it kind of depends on the student which way they go on that. But it really helps with them being able to find out what they love, or find out this is not what they want to do at all. I mean, I've had some students, one that went into from wanting to be a microbiologist to deciding to be an auto mechanic. So he figured that out in high school instead of being getting into his junior year, when he figured out that it was the icky things, as he said, is the things he didn't like. And microbiology, as you can see all around my head here, are icky things. They're not stuff that is clean looking all the time or clean smelling.
Yeah. And it's better to find out then that you can't they can deal with that, or you can deal with blood, or you don't like the sight of blood, then
Mhm.
investing in college and then eventually later on finding out that, okay, all that money you used was not necessarily for nothing because you learned some things, but it's like you can't use it because you're not going to continue necessarily in that path. You can use it professionally.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to have it where you go down a path that leads to you either getting all the way to the end of your degree and then just not using that, or you could have it where you are wanting, yeah, you realize this is not for me, and I figured out what I want to do, but maybe the university I'm at doesn't have that program, so now I need to transfer to a new one that does have the program I want, and maybe not all the credits transfer the way you planned on, and you may be there an extra year or two, depending on how that happened. I mean, the student that went in to be an auto tech ended up going to a 2-year auto tech program,
Yeah.
and maybe his English, maybe a math would have transferred, but not very much else. So he
Yeah.
would have had to do the 2-year degree just as if he never took college at all, but have a lot
Yeah.
more debt.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing also about going from this to Autotech is over there are some pretty, how I say, manual skills that require attention to detail. And some of
Mm-hmm.
what he would have learned actually here is he's actually going to be able to use over there, probably. And also maybe he's going to be a little more attentive when he's using
Mm-hmm.
chemicals. Maybe he's going to arrange things a lot better, maybe plan things through in his head a lot better before he starts his work, and sorts of things of that nature could actually be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. The transferable skills are huge, and you never know where those will take you.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
And concerning the program, where is it right now and where do you see it going? Have you received maybe how do I put that? Other people maybe from other cities, other districts who have shown interest and who would like some of their students to participate, and how is that going?
Actually, really, really well. The program, like I said, has really taken off. I have 17 incoming juniors this year, which is amazing. And this time around, one time several years ago, I had 15, but I only had 5 microscopes. So you had a lot of students waiting around to use them. Where this time I have 17 binocular compound microscopes that go up to 1,000x, research grade stuff, so that they all can learn at the same time. In terms of other programs out there, there are other ones that exist. Not many that are thinking about it as I do with my program. A lot of them are purely thinking about, I'm training phlebotomists, I'm training medical lab
All
assistants,
right.
specimen processors, or I look at us building the minor league of the medical laboratory. So you have baseball has a minor league system, and you have the majors sitting on top. Minor league system has to be bigger than the majors to be able to send their best
Yeah.
athletes up to the majors. And the specimen processors, the phlebotomists, your sterile processing techs, I think of those as the minor league. And if we really worked on having those full and having the constantly training young people to work in those entry level careers, some of them will decide, you know what, I want to go up to be
Yeah.
that technician, that scientist, that pathologist, and maybe a doctor of clinical lab science or a pathologist. But having that background allows for them to be more interested or be more effective in knowing that this is what they want to do. And some of them may stay in the minors their whole time. Oh, wait, there's baseball players that never leave the minors but have a 20-year career in the minors, and that's your phlebotomist. That if you need a vein drawn stat, you call that person and they get that blood draw. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to have it so that the several places that I'm working with right now, as they're trying to develop programs, are thinking about it that way. Not just that I'm here to train a phlebotomist or I'm here to train a lab assistant, but that I'm building that minor league of the medical lab so that the content is highly engaging. It's something that you feel like you're learning new stuff every day. You can see a report in the news and much better understand it than your even university trained friends in other fields. You, as a high
Yeah.
school student, may understand it better because you have more of a background in it.
Yeah.
But I am having several that are showing interest, and some of the major medical lab organizations in the United States are looking to potentially have programs like mine across the country.
Yeah, actually, that's wonderful. That's really nice. Hopefully, we get more and more of those. And like you said, build the minors so that eventually we can get more people in the majors.
Mhm.
Aside from what we've talked about, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
I think that my biggest thing is just trying to, in any way you can, promote the medical laboratory. I've kind of expanded up, my comfort level. Not only am I going into high schools and talking about medical lab science, and even elementary or middle schools, but I've also started talking to like my local politicians and trying to have them know about the field and the need that's there, and trying to have them become advocates for the medical laboratory and be effective advocates. So they actually understand what's going on, the need that's there, trying to promote programs like mine or just the medical laboratory as a career, trying to get it out of the shadows. And if you have people like that are leaders in your community that can speak for you, that's so much more powerful than just you alone.
Yeah.
And trying to get out into, like I said, if you're not right now, having you getting out into the local community and talking at churches or schools or those sort of things, get out there and do that. And if you can get your local hospital lab or wherever you work, trying to have them help you get into those schools. Maybe if you can have the students do a field trip out to your lab, and maybe for students that are even really interested, have them look into doing shadows at your lab, if that's something that's a possibility. Because if they aren't going to go through a program like mine, at least if they can get into see it as a field trip and maybe even as a shadow, they're going to start to feel like, oh, I found my people. This is who I want to be around. This is where I think my career could be, because I can imagine myself being in there. Where if it's just something on a sheet of paper or a video, it may not be an automatic that this is where I long to be.
All right. Thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to us about your program today. If anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way of doing that?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'm on linkedin.com/ James Payne 4. That's primarily where I am professionally, and feel free to contact me, and I'd love to meet you.
All right. Thanks a lot for taking the time. Hopefully we'll talk to you again very soon to talk about some of the successes, some more of the successes you've had with your program. So medical laboratory scientists, thanks a lot for being here with us today. Like you heard, do everything you can to promote the profession as much as you can. Talk about it with students, with family, with friends. Ensure that we get out of being the hidden profession and we become a visible profession. Thanks a lot, and hopefully we see you next time to talk more MedLab.